Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Off Ramp Project. I'm Carla McLaren, and I want to look at socialism today because it's kind of a boogeyman word to say socialism. On the left, to call things fascism is a way to say these guys are not okay, and this is all, a horrendous kind of violence. And as I said in the previous episode 7 about fascism, um, nobody alive today would call themselves a fascist, even if they are behaving in fascistic ways, because it's known that fascism is a failed system, right? So if I call someone fascist or a government fascist, what I'm doing is insulting them. And I'm telling you that I'm a part of an in crowd. There's a lot of people in an in crowd. If I call myself an anti-fascist, well, everybody is an anti-fascist because nobody in their right mind would say this is a fascist government that I'm so proud of creating. Yeah, it's an insult. One of the reasons I wanted to look at socialism is on the right. To call something socialist is an insult. And though people will call themselves socialists and proudly do so, on the right, socialism is kind of the boogeyman. So we've got fascism on the left being the boogeyman and socialism on the right. And whenever there's boogeymen, whenever we're dealing with hatred and the shadow, I always want to look at it because the shadow is where a lot of the truth lives. So if I hate something, I'm saying something really about myself and my own situation and my own political party. So let's look at socialism. First, looking at capitalism. There's three main forms of government in the modern world, although there were a great number of forms in the pre-modern world. There's capitalism, socialism, and communism. Capitalism in the United States is not pure capitalism. Actually, there's very few pure anything. There's not pure socialism, pure communism, pure capitalism in most countries because each way of governing has its own flaws and its own problems and its own positive aspects. Yes, so to be one or the other is to be, I think, too simple-minded to live in the modern world. There are positives in each and there are negatives in each. So looking at them without throwing anybody into the shadow, without using hatred or adoration or any of those destabilizing, polarizing ways of looking at things. Let's look at these three ways of governing, ways of running a community. First, let's look at capitalism because I'm talking in one of the most capitalistic countries in the world, the United States. In capitalism, the means of production are owned by private people, you and me, or government, or corporations. So the means of production are capital, meaning money, property, resources like natural resources. In the United States, we can own land. We can own bits of the air. We can own pieces of the ocean. We can own things here individually. And labor. So the means of production, meaning that I can own capital. I can own a business. I can own the building the business is in. And I can have people work for me and pay them, right? In socialism, there is a collective ownership of the means of production. And the goal in socialism, which is separate from a goal of capitalism, in capitalism, we want a free market economy, and it's driven by supply and demand. And you or I can work our way up to wealth. Yes. Now, the problem with that idea is many people who work extremely hard are never going to be able to access wealth because they're in a social class that doesn't allow for that to happen. In the United States, we believe that we don't have social classes, but we absolutely do. And so there's lower class people who have less access to education. There's middle class people who have access to education, but not to um, ancestral riches. And then there's the upper class, and they have access to ancestral riches and education and a kind of an easier progression into the workplace because there's so many things in their social class that can catch them if they fall, right? Whereas in the middle class, you have your family and you have maybe a house that has a mortgage on it. And in the lower classes, you need to learn how to live without money and without support. So in a capitalist economy, you're going to see social classes based on your access to money and power. Yes. In socialism, there's a collective ownership. I'm looking down because I've written this down. There's a collective ownership of the means of production. So we collectively own capital. We collectively own natural resources. We collectively care for and moderate labor. The goal in socialism, which was created as a corrective for the problems that capitalism creates in terms of inequality, structural inequality, based on how much money you can access. It's not based on your work ethic. It is based on how much money you can access. And people in the upper classes are born with the access already. So they're going to get able to start out in a much easier way and live in a much easier way without actually ever needing to work hard at all. You can have hardworking people in the upper classes, but you don't need them, right? And you can have more relaxed people in the lower classes, but they're not going to make it. Yeah. So socialism was created to moderate the extremes of capitalism. It was a protest against capitalism, and its goal was to eliminate classes and eliminate inequality through regulating how the economy works and how the means of productions are allowed to be accessible by everyone, rather than in a capitalist system where the access is massively in the upper classes. And the upper classes are, at this point, our wealth disparities in the United States are basically a form of violence. It's so extreme. We talk about the 1%, which is the 1% of billionaires in the upper classes in the United States and other countries, where the amount they make and the amount they own and the amount of capital they control is more than, the lower 50% or 60% or even 70% of the rest of us, right? So the differences between the rich and the poor here in the United States, which is an aggressively capitalist country, is so extreme as to be endangering to life for people who are the poorest, right? It's the inequality here in the United States is extreme. And if you work close to the ground, as I do, I've been volunteering to support our extensive unsheltered community here in Sonoma County, which is a very expensive place to live. It's not good for living things, right? And by expensive, I mean that rents rise above 1/3 of a person's income. And here, that happened a long time ago. When you see rents rise above 1/3 of a normal income that a regular person could make, not the upper classes, but the working classes, when rents rise above 30%, you will see an explosion in homelessness. And that's what we see here in Sonoma County. In places where it's easier to live and rents do not rise above 30%, you will see less homelessness. It's kind of a one-to-one correlation. So if you go to a place where the rents are high, where the housing market is inflated, and nobody's controlling it, right? It's not socialism. This is a free market economy, and people just get what they get for their houses and for their rents, right? When you see that and you're like, I would really like to live in Sonoma County, you need to think about what it's doing to people at the lowest levels of our unequal class-based society. if you get to Sonoma County, you say, gosh darn it, there's so many homeless people out here. And I'm like, well, first of all, I know their names, okay? And I'm out there every week making sure that they have sleeping bags and water and electrolytes and hygiene and first aid, right? There are some of us who realize what capitalism does, and we're trying to be like, we're trying to help, okay? But don't be surprised if you're in a place that's very expensive to live in, and that it's beautiful and whatever, if there is going to be grueling, endangering poverty in that same place. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a feature of places where the rents have been allowed to go above 1/3 of a normal person's income. Yeah. And that happened here quite a while ago. And we have a massive community of unsheltered people. Some people call them homeless, and I use the term unsheltered because they have a home. Most people who are homeless come from that same area in which they find themselves. People here have a home. It's Sonoma County. What they don't have is shelter, right? That's what they don't have. And so that's why I focus on the word unsheltered. They have a home. This is their home. They grew up here. They went to high school here. And they can't make it because the rents are unachievable by a person in the working classes. Yeah. So socialism's goal is to eliminate classes and to eliminate inequality through regulations, through government regulations, and the collective ownership of society's means of production means that, to the extent that humans can, because humans do love their ridiculous hierarchies of human worth, and they do love not knowing how to work their emotions, and they do love not understanding jealousy and envy and moving to greed and self-centeredness. They love that stuff until they figure it out, right? But with socialism, it's a way to moderate capitalism. Now, people talk about communism as if it's an entirely separate thing, but communism actually followed socialism. So communism is a form of socialism where everything is owned by the government, and it wants to eradicate capitalism. So communism goes a step further. Socialism says, let us fix and regulate and moderate capitalism, because without regulations, you get what we have now in the United States, which I call end stage capitalism, because it's a cancer. It eats everything. Everything is for sale. Our attention is for sale. Well, in the attention economy, your emotions are for sale. Your empathy is for sale. Everything you own is for sale. And that's, not a way to have a healthy world. That's how you kill things with end stage capitalism. Yeah. Now, I said that most countries are a combination of these things. Most countries are a combination between pure capitalism, which is, it can be super greed and super inequality. Pure socialism, which is an enforced equality where we don't allow classes and unequal systems to thrive, right? Or communism, which there's a few fully communist countries. I don't know. We talk about China, but China is out there doing capitalism like nobody's business. So to say, America's a capitalist country is to not understand what capitalism is and what socialism is, because we pay taxes in order to create a more equal world, right? We pay taxes to have public education instead of private, right? Private education can only be accessed by wealthy people. We don't want that in a healthy community. We share through taxes the care of roads, buildings, bridges, infrastructure, the plumbing that brings water to your house, fire departments, police departments, right? Our taxes pay in a socialist way. And let's not make socialism the boogie word, the boogeyman. We collectively agreed as Americans that there are things that we need to take care of. Social Security, which people pay into over time. And you think I am paying my Social Security every paycheck so that I can get my Social Security when I'm older. That's not how it works. We pay in collectively. And then by the time we get older, Social Security hopefully has been well managed so that we can live the rest of our lives after retirement with some level of possible support. Yes. Unfortunately, here in the United States, we haven't taken Social Security very, very seriously. And so many elders, after having, a life of working, are living on about $1,000 a month, which if you're in Sonoma County, that won't even get you a room in a house, right? You can pay $1,100 a month to have a room in a house here in Sonoma County. So how are elders living, right? Another thing that we've created that is more socialist is HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, and Section 8, which are vouchers that you can use to say, I only get $1,000 a month. I can't pay $1,100 for a room in your house. Okay. So a Section 8 voucher will say, now I pay 1/3 of my income, which is, remember, that's the place where the problems begin to happen. So even with a HUD voucher, there's not really the awareness that 1/3 is too much. Okay. A lot of people on HUD vouchers are still living in poverty because they're paying 1/3 of their income to live in a house or a room or an apartment. Yeah. So we have that socialist agreement that we are all sharing the care of the elderly, sharing the care of people who are disabled or poor. We just don't do it very well because of our capitalist overlay that says we should all be making our own money and pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. It's a part of our national mythology, and now that capitalism has so few regulations on it, it has become a part of our national nightmare. The purpose of socialism isn't to take away your stuff, and that's what a lot of people on the right who treat socialism as an evil would believe, right? And that's part of what the right says about the left here in the United States, which is that the left are bleeding heart, which means that you care so much that your heart actually bleeds out. Like you lose your own blood system because of how much you care for others. And if that was going to be the way I was going to die, I'm going to say that's a good way to die. Okay. But the idea is that if you take care of other people, there's less for you, which is a very tragic way to look at the world. But it's a part of what has become the capitalist mythology. It's more for me and less for you. And the way that I become a millionaire or a billionaire is making sure that I get the best possible deals from other people, but they pay me as much as is humanly possible for me to get, right? And that's what we're seeing here in Sonoma County and other very wealthy areas in terms of rentals, right? You're going to pay a lot for your rental here, and your landlord has very few. There are regulations. There's not, we don't have rent control here, which rent control is crucial in an out of control place like this. But I'm going to pay you for hearing this. What year is this? 2026, Sonoma County, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house might rent for $3,000 a month. So I'm giving you my $3,000. You're sucking it up. And you're paying for things, right? You're paying the mortgage on your house, you're paying the property taxes, etc. But if there's something wrong in the house and you don't want to fix it, I've actually got to sue you, right? It's not like you realize that you are doing one of the most important things in the world, which is providing me with housing so that I can be safe, so that I can work, so that I can have a family, right? Your whole thing is, where's my $3,000? And the toilet isn't that bad, just live with it. So in capitalism, there is an almost sociopathic lack of concern for others. And so that's where socialism came from. It's a corrective. It's not like communism, which wants to eradicate capitalism. Communism looks at capitalism, says it's so evil you can't fix it. There's nothing to do but get rid of it completely. And so I can say that communism is kind of an extreme reaction to capitalism. Socialism is a more measured reaction to capitalism, but capitalism is always the problem. Okay. I want to talk about two socialist things that most of us would understand here in the United States. In my fascism talk, I talked about a whole neighborhood having lawns, owning two lawnmowers. That wasn't socialism, because there's an expectation in socialism that you will be a part of the community. It's not sort of, I'm going to contribute to the lawnmowers if I feel like it or not. That's not socialism. But we have two socialist structures here in the United States that most people will know. One is a CSA, and that is community supported agriculture. I don't know if you live in an agricultural community. I do. Here in Sonoma County, we're an ag community. You can pay a monthly or yearly fee to a local farmer or group of farmers, and they will supply you with whatever it is they have. So they'll give you eggs every week. They'll give you a box of eggs or onions or lettuces or turnips or meat or whatever it is they're making. And you are supporting, in a socialistic way, their labor. So you and everybody else who's a part of the CSA is supporting these people to be in agriculture, to be farmers, to be ranchers. And you are receiving from that a graduated, series of boxes going throughout the entire CSA community. That's socialism, right? It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not taking away anybody's money. And that farmer can still be involved in the capitalist enterprise of selling what they're not giving you in boxes, right? So they can be both socialist and capitalist. And that's what's true about the United States. We are a capitalist country, but we are democratic, so that we sort of don't count the electoral college, which takes away the single vote and puts votes into a big basket, a socialist basket, so that large states like California don't overwhelm tiny states like Vermont. Okay, so that's a socialist approach. That's not capitalist. That's not democratic. That's socialist. We've got socialism here. Okay. Another one is an HOA, which is a homeowners association. Condos, some housing communities, and mobile home communities have HOAs where everybody pays in. You don't have a choice. If you live there, you are paying your HOA fee. And the HOA takes care of the roads, the exterior of the buildings. If there's a pool, if there's plumbing issues, if there's roofing issues, the HOA takes care of it. That's socialism. Now, HOAs, I have a realtor friend who says friends don't let friends join HOAs because generally they are very badly managed. Now, I went into an HOA not knowing that. And I looked around in the first month and I was like, I need to get on this board because these people are out of control. So I became the vice president of the board to try to kind of moderate what was happening. And I did well, but I needed to leave because it wasn't going to be okay without me. And I was embarrassed to be a part of it. But if they're professionally managed, HOAs can be awesome. My dad lived in a he was on the board and he was a part of the management team, and they did great. It was a condo HOA. They had tennis, he was a tennis and golf kind of a dad. They had tennis, they had swimming, they had a unit that you could have for guests. Like, it was very nice. And they all took care of it together and they did great. And the funny thing is, he's a lifelong Republican. And if you had said socialism to him, he might have punched you or something. No, he didn't punch people, but he would have gotten really upset. And yet he was living in a beautifully managed socialist community called an HOA. Yeah. So the United States is not primarily capitalist. Well, it thinks of itself as primarily capitalist, but we do pay taxes, which is the social community getting together and contributing to the social good. Yeah. And something that was really kind of sad is that, especially in the Reagan era, paying taxes was seen as an evil. It was seen as something that only, punks do. And there was a lot of talk about, I don't know if you remember if you're old enough to remember, but there was a talk about the, I don't know, $10,000 toilet seats that some military contractor got away with because nobody was watching and nobody was double checking the receipts, right? And so instead of saying, hey, we need more oversight of toilet seat contractors because this got out of our hands, instead it became a way that the whole system was ruined, and we had to pay less taxes, and taxes were hurting us, and the government was out of control, right? There was hysteria in it, which should have made people go, why are people so hysterical, instead of getting into the hysteria with them. And so now we have a very low tax rate, and our difference between the rich and the poor is, in a horrendous place that only socialistic mechanisms can address, right? So when people say that they hate socialism, and they're not fascists, because fascists hate socialism, hate it. They probably hate communism even more, although many fascists hold on, didn't the fascists like the communists? No, they didn't. The fascists did not like the communists. So they don't like socialists. If someone is throwing fascism around, understand that's an insult. And it's a boogeyman. If someone is throwing socialism around, understand to them it seems like an insult because they don't understand that the United States is not primarily capitalist. It is, that's what we say to people, but we have a tremendous number of healthy socialist structures that help us collectively care for what is important to us: roads, police, city governments, fire departments, the Forest Service, the National Park System, things that make our lives wonderful, infrastructure of bridges and waterways and roadways, and all of the things that we share, all of the things that our taxes help pay for, Social Security, Section 8, HUD, things that make life easier and attempt to address the inequality that capitalism always creates, right? So is it socialism? I hope so. But what I hope it is socialism and capitalism working together in a democratic system. That's the end of a lecture on socialism. I am a democratic socialist. And what that means is I believe in everybody gets a vote, even though in our imperfect system with the Electoral College, not everybody gets a vote. And people are a part of making decisions. They're not having decisions made for them as in communism, where the government owns everything. We make decisions. Democratic socialists are capitalists. Okay, so we are capitalism, democracy, and socialism all together in the United States. And I think that's the best of us. That's what makes us the best. So here's the problem. The Nazis called themselves democratic socialists too. So just throwing around that term of democratic socialism, realizing it has a history. So I generally just say I'm on the left. I want to make sure that capitalism doesn't do what it does when it's unregulated, which has become end-stage capitalism, and create intentional inequality, right? It creates intentional inequality for people who, for whatever reason, can't work, right? People who are disabled, people who are young or old. We don't take good care of our young. We do not take good care of our old. We do not take good care of our poor, and we do not take good care of our disabled. So those are the places where capitalism is failing us tremendously. And especially in the workplace, we have some of the worst worker protections in the known world. But we tell ourselves we're number one. And it's a mythology. It's a mythology. It's important to look at things as they are and know that in the United States, we have socialist structures that are crucial to helping deal with the problems that capitalism brings with it. You can't have capitalism without something. It needs some kind of moderating influence. Not communism, probably, although my communist friends will be like, you don't even understand what communism is. I'm like, okay, then I'll learn. But let me know what it is, right? But socialism isn't an evil. It is a necessary moderator of capitalistic excesses. So thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.